Now today we're talking about system administrators, and part of the difficulty is that there are several things that that appellation could refer to, and so we're going to cover all of them and hope to clear up any confusion. We're also going to look into what a system administrator account can do that no other user account is able to. For the most part, if your personal account has enough permissions, you can do almost everything you need to do in Best Notes just logged in under yourself. However, there are a few things that only the system administrator is capable of doing. The sysadmin is a super user account. I believe most of us are probably familiar with that. But when we say system administrator, we could be referring to either the person, we could be referring to the account type, or we could also be referring to a little checkbox that we will look at in a little bit. We notice that after I logged in with the sysadmin super user account, it is now asking me to log in with my personal account. This is done in case there are multiple system administrators at your facility. That way we are able to still track and audit any activity that is done under the sysadmin super user account. As I log in as a system administrator, everything looks more or less the same on our login page. However, if we go to the settings section, we will notice there are a couple options that are not normally there, as well as some submenus that we will look at that are specific to system administrators. We also notice up here on top that it says that the system administrator is logged in. If you're ever wondering whether or not you're logged in under your personal account or the system administrator, you can always look on the top left of the screen. The first thing we're going to look at is the user menu. Now, if you have the Manage Users permission, you'll be able to go to the Users menu whether or not you're logged in under the sysadmin super user. We will notice a couple different options, however. First off, when you're logged in under a sysadmin super user account, you have the ability to check this system administrator checkbox. Now, the checkbox is not the same thing as the sysadmin super user login. What that checkbox does do, first, put you on an email list that we can send out to our system administrators if we need to send out an announcement or an email blast of some sort. Secondly, it allows you to speak with us at Best Notes and authorize system changes. There are a couple places that we have written down who is authorized to request system changes, whether it be adding new referral types or changing med-clinical documentation. That does need to come from someone authorized to do so. If you have this checkbox, which will also correspond with a SA in red by the name, then we know that you are authorized for that. We also notice that we have the options for default permission groups and password settings up here at the top. Normally those would not appear unless you were logged in as the sysadmin super user. Permission groups are more or less what they sound like. We can set up a custom permission group, such as intern or temporary employee or sub-administrator or whatever. And we can decide what the default permissions they would have would be. So we can go through here and choose for that user type what a proper permission set would be. And what that would do is if we needed to create a new user, we could select under permission group a certain permission group, and it would automatically apply those permissions that we had set to begin with. This is especially beneficial for companies that have either a lot of turnover and or a lot of staff. It can save a lot of time in going through our admittedly prodigious amount of checkboxes governing permissions if we create some default permission groups. The other option we have here is password settings. Here's where we can change some of the security settings with the password. By default, the screen lock will happen after 30 minutes of inactivity. Best Notes will lock and will require your password to open it back up. By default, the minimum password length is 8 characters. We cannot make it shorter than that. That is actually more or less mandated by federal guidelines. However, if you would like to have more stringent security, you can certainly increase the minimum password length. We also have the maximum password age. In other words, that will enforce when you need to reset your password. So after 90 days or 3 months, this database will require that users reset and change their passwords. If that seems a little long to you and you would like to be a little bit more secure, you can certainly shrink that. Or if that is not a concern for you, you can expand the maximum password age to up to a year. We also can set how many generations we can have a unique password. What that is referring to is whether or not you can repeat a password. So if my password is banana trout, if I need to reset my password in 30 days, can I change it back to banana trout, or do I need to do watermelon salmon? If I do watermelon salmon, if this is set to 3 generations, I have to have 3 separate passwords before I can go back to banana trout. By default, that is set to 1. We also can select what passwords must contain. By default, we must have an uppercase, lowercase, and number. That again ties into federal guidelines. However, whether or not you require a special character, such as the exclamation mark, the @ symbol, the $, and so forth, is up to you. You can also dictate how many maximum failed login attempts someone can have before it locks their account. By default, we have it set to 5 times. However, you can set it anywhere from 3 to 9 before it locks a user out. You can also decide how long a user is locked out for, whether it be 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 3 minutes, or so on, if the maximum number of login attempts has been exceeded. There is also, under this more area, a nuclear option, as it were. If security has been significantly compromised, you can hit this button and force every user to reset their password. Hopefully that will never need to happen, but in the event of data breach, that is an option available to you. Another thing available to system administrator login that is not available otherwise is the user group setting. A user group is another way of being granular with who is able to access certain information. Along with access tags, and we will get to that in a moment, if we want to restrict certain types of documentations for certain groups, we can create user groups here. Make sure to set the time zone correctly. If the time zone for the user group is different from the time zone set for the user, it will cause annoyances in the calendar. Any user in the system will show up in this drop-down menu. You can also decide whether they should be able to read certain documentation or if they should also be able to read and write. Then, if we are on a client's page, we will have the ability to restrict notes to specific user groups. That way, only those user groups will be able to read the documentation. That also applies with uploads. You can restrict uploaded file to specific user groups as well. That can be especially handy if you have an admissions department or a billing department or something of the sort. That is certainly not required, but that can be a very good tool to restrict access to the minimally required amount. Another option that we have when logged in under the sysadmin super user account is the facilities. And this is more or less what it says. This is where you can enter in a new facility. So if you have more than one location for your practice, especially if you're using our billing functionality, it is important to have facilities created with the proper taxonomy and other information. Any facilities entered here will also show up in calendar appointments as an option under the facility dropdown. Another thing that system administrators can do is they are able to view other people's calendar appointments that are marked as private. An appointment that is set to private will show as blocked off on the user's calendar. So if Joe Regular is looking at Slim McAdministrator's calendar, he will see that that time block is cordoned off, but they will not be able to see exactly what is going on. They will also be unable to move anything or change anything or reschedule anything. If needs be, logged in under the sysadmin super user account, you can view someone else's calendar and unmark private if necessary. That is a relatively new addition, and it has already been very beneficial in many circumstances. The sysadmin super user also has access to certain audit reports that otherwise would not be accessible. If we go to the Reports tab, and under the report type, we have the specific audit report. And in this, you can basically get a list of any actions performed by a particular user and or a particular client during a date range. You can specify which actions you were wanting to see what they have done. We can generate the report. We can see here that the user, Joe Regular, has both created and viewed. He's created a clinical note on patient John Doe, and he has also viewed John Doe's page within the event date and time. If there is more than 20 entries, we will have the option to jump between pages. We also have the ability to sort by action, by patient, by entity, or entity ID. The entity ID is useful when communicating with Best Notes to find a particular note or to retrieve a backup or something of the sort. Each note and entry in Best Notes is assigned a unique entity ID. Generally, that's not something you'll need to be bothering with. Other reports that are available to the sysadmin super user are found at the bottom of the report type dropdown. They all start with user. These reports are, the reports on the list are visible to any person that is logged into the database that has the report permission. However, if they select it, it will tell them they do not have permissions unless you are signed in as the sysadmin super user account. The user audit will simply tell us who's logged in at what time, as well as from where they have logged in. We notice these IP addresses are all the same. I was using the same computer to set this up. We can also see here that Joe Regular tried several times to log into his account and failed. This can be useful to see if anyone is trying a brute force attack and to try to hack into the system. It can also be useful in determining who has been using the system at what time for any number of purposes. We can also see proxy users. That also includes best note support. So if we log in and are logged in as one of your users, you will be able to track who did what, even if it is someone logging in under a super user account. That, of course, is necessary in case there needs to be an audit of some sort. We also have the user billing list, who are billed by best notes retroactively. So the bill you receive in March is based on your usage from February. This billing report will show you who you are being billed for. It can be a very good tool for budgeting purposes. We also have a basic report. If you have a lot of user groups, you can run this report to see who is in which user group. Sometimes we forget to either remove or add people to the proper user group. This can be a good way to see everyone together. The user login report is similar to the user audit report, but it will give a little bit of information as to the password updated, who changed it, whether it was an administrator or the user itself, whether they've logged in or not. I, of course, have never logged in as SlimMic administrator without logging in with the sysadmin super user, so it is saying I've never logged in. But that's a way to perhaps see people that are not using the system that maybe you can inactivate so you avoid paying for them. We also have a user permissions report. This can get fairly lengthy, but if you need to see who has which permissions, it's easy enough to run this report as opposed to going to the users tab and clicking on everyone and scrolling through all the available permissions. Of course, when creating a user, you can set whether or not they are a provider. If they are, this is a report, the user providers report, that will show who is listed as what kind of provider. That can be handy depending on how you are using that function. Some other abilities that the sysadmin super user has include access tags. Anyone with the manage tags permission can go to settings and then tags, and they'll be able to add fixed and or user tags. For all functional intents and purposes, fixed tags and user tags are identical. That was not necessarily always the case, but generally just need to do fixed tags. As a sysadmin, we can add new access tags. Access tags are what they say. They are tags that control access. You can create the type of tag here. Only the system administrator will have the ability to choose the access option. The access tags will do, when it comes to a user, an access tag is more or less like a key. When it comes to a patient or a client or a contact, an access tag is more of a lock. So in order to be fairly granular in the permissions that we provide, again, HIPAA requests minimally required permissions available. Only the people with the proper keys are able to, in essence, unlock the clients with those locks. In this case, only people with the global tag, and that's functions a little bit differently, we'll get to that in a moment, or with the billing access tag, or in essence, only people that have just the global skeleton key or have the billing key will be able to unlock this person's file. That can be useful in restricting which clients can view or what users can view which clients, especially if you're using multiple facilities or locations. An easy thing to kind of get confused by is the way the global tag works for a user. For a client, it is fairly straightforward. If they have the global tag checked, anyone can see them. They're available to anyone that has the global permission, and of course, every user will have the global permission. When it comes to the users, any additional access tag will actually remove the global capability. So with nothing highlighted and selected except for global, Joe Regular here can see everybody. However, the second I add a different one, now he can only see current. That can sometimes cause some issues. If we come over here to Slim Mick Administrator, we have everything checked. Logically, it would make sense if that means Slim Mick Administrator can see everything. However, what this is really saying is they can see anyone with billing or current or HR or inquiry or marketing or past. If there is a user that just has global and does not have any of these others, then Slim here will not be able to see them. So perhaps somewhat paradoxically, having nothing but global checked actually has more viewing permissions than having everything checked. Now let's talk a little bit more about the System Administrator checkbox. Eventually there will be more direct connections capabilities tied to that. Currently, what it allows you to do is, one, as I've mentioned before, we can verify that you are authorized to request system changes. Because of that, we should probably be a little hesitant to add that checkbox to lots of people. But it also allows you to reset the system administrator password. Not too long before now, anytime a system administrator password needed to be reset, the sysadmin account is, of course, subject to all the rules and the password settings that any other user is, you would have to call Best Notes, and we would have to verify for you and send you an encrypted email and jump through a lot of hoops to be certain and safe that we aren't allowing access to people that should not have it. But now, if the system administrator password needs to be reset, if needs be, you certainly can call us and we'll be happy to help. But if you are logged in under someone who has that SA checkbox, you can now go to the system administrator account and reset the password yourself. That can save everyone a lot of time and headaches. On the note of passwords, a general reminder is that we at Best Notes will not and cannot reset passwords for people who are not system administrators. There are two reasons for that. One, we have enough information on the system administrators that we can verify their identity and help them out. We do not necessarily have that with every Joe Regular out there. On top of that, with our 1,000 companies with dozens of users, if we reset everyone's passwords, we would be literally doing nothing else all day. So if at any point someone calls you and says, hey, can you help me reset my password? Please don't get mad at us. We probably referred them to you. We also notice that in addition to the SA checkbox and the sysadmin super login, we have different columns, including the administrator column. Now, these are not necessarily equated. You could certainly have a regular user who has the system administrator checkbox checked. The administrator column is more of an organizational benefit, and it can be a good visual representation when you're going into the users. It does, however, carry with it certain permissions. Primarily, if you're on a client and you are looking at their data forms, if your user account is under the administrator column, you are able to delete data forms from a client's page. That won't come up too often, but that is how that is tied into it, and it's an easy thing to pass by. Now, another thing that is not specifically restricted to system administrators is the quick lists. Theoretically, anyone with this permission is able to change quick list labels. We find that very quickly, too many cooks spoil the broth. What quick lists are these lists over here on the left. Everyone has a my list, but we also have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. We can associate certain clients with different quick lists. So if for some reason you needed to have a list of everyone who was right-handed, now that I've added a title on the client's page under a quick list, I can see, hey, one is right-handed. On top of that, when I hover over the one, it will give me the name of that quick list. Generally, best practice is only a system administrator should be doing that. However, anyone with that permission is able to do that. Our classic development team is continually releasing code to improve and streamline BestNote software. We do recommend that anyone with the system administrator role in your facility have that SA checkbox, because that adds you to our emailing list. If you have not been receiving our email blasts and you would like to, first off, make sure that you have the SA checkbox checked. Also, check your spam folder, and failing all that, feel free to reach out to us. That is largely what we have as to what makes a system administrator super user login special. Of course, we know that there's more than a login that makes you special, and we appreciate all the good work you do on behalf of your companies and on behalf of BestNotes. Feel free to reach out to us if at any point you need to.